everyone. Happy Friday. We've got a great lineup and show today. You know, politics is a dirty business and it stays dirty. Of course, AI is making it even harder with deep fakes. And is GM collecting data without our knowledge? I don't know. All this and more today on Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, happy Friday. I'm remote today, but it's Alan Schummel for Techstrong, and we've got a great gang and some great topics to go over with you all today. Let me introduce you to who we have. We have a big West Coast contingent today with our roving editor extraordinaire, John Thwart. John, welcome. How are you?
It's good to be here. Hello, Alan. Hi, everybody else.
Thank you. And also joining us on the West Coast is our a CMO maven and host of her own podcast, as well as Futurum Group analyst and regular gang member, Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa. Lisa, it's great to have you on.
Great to be here, Alan. I'm so excited to dig into some of these topics with you all.
Yeah, no, it's meaty today. Speaking of, well, not meaty anymore. He's shedding weight before our eyes. Our very own CTA and CTO, Mitch Ashley. Mitch, you're looking svelte on there.
Well, I thought you were going to call me Maven there. You paused for a minute, but hey, I'll take that. That's great.
Okay, well, if you want to be title. A Maven, you can be a Maven, Mitch.
It's good for Lisa. It's good for me.
All right.
Thanks.
You're a Maven. And then joining us and holding down the fort in our Boca Raton studio headquarters, it's our Chief Content Officer, Mike Vizard. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. How's everybody else?
Good. Great to have you on. So, guys, I mentioned a little bit in the opening. We got some great topics today, but we want to start off with this continuing story around hacking or attempted hacking of both of the major parties' political parties' campaigns. It came out, John, I think you did some work on this at Black Hat, that the Trump campaign, word had come out the Trump campaign was compromised.
Right. At the time at Black Hat, everyone was careful that something was going to happen, but they didn't know what it was going to be. So they expected a repeat of 2016. It turns out in a kind of weird way it's happening. I mean, one of the main themes I heard at Black Hat was that, and somebody put it really well, they said AI combined with social media has created weapons of mass deception, right? And we think about it, you made it a point earlier at the beginning, which is so true. I mean, it's always been dirty. And think about the Daily Machine in Chicago, Tammany Hall in New York, local elections in Texas back in LBJ's days. But now AI has kind of helped turbocharge phishing attacks, spear phishing. And ironically, in the case of the Trump campaign, the person who was caught was our friend Roger Stone, the old dirty trickster from the Nixon years. So he was the guy they leveraged to get the information from. I think Mitch maybe can describe this organization called Oil Rig, but I think it's just really interesting. One of the other things that I wanted to point out was that at Black Hat, Jen Easterly, who's at CISA, she's the director. She was actually just on MSNBC yesterday. She's talking about how elections are complicated, and I can guarantee that things will go wrong, as she said. So she foreshadowed it. Maybe she had an inkling of what was going on. But in this case, it's an Iranian group versus the Russians, although the Russians and the Chinese are probably going to get involved eventually in this campaign. To me, it's interesting. We're discovering it maybe earlier. It's maybe more pronounced than it was before, but it's going after both campaigns. And it will be interesting to see what, if anything, we can do to tamper it and kind of minimize the threats to not just data breaches, but misinformation and deepfakes.
So let me just kind of lay out where we are as far as we know, and if anyone has more information, jump in. But it does seem Roger Stone was compromised via a spear phishing attack through him, or maybe others they haven't announced. There were some documents that were not for public dispersal that were compromised, and then someone purporting to be Roger or someone with an AOL address, an anonymous person, sent around some of these documents to some of the media organizations. I think the primary one was sort of a background on J.D. Vance, the VP candidate. But unlike 2020, to the media organization's credit, they didn't jump at this bait and start publishing it and letting the mud fly. They actually called it out, and the FBI and so forth got involved. Now, it wasn't just in the case of Russia going after the Democratic candidates in, I guess, 2016. It was 2016.
Right.
Not 2020, I apologize. But in this case, if this is the group behind it, they seem to have also made similar attempts to infiltrate the Democratic Party. I mean, look, at the end of the day, they just want to sow chaos. What I think is really ironic is you mentioned Roger Stone. Well, he's the one who was reaching out to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks last time, right? Trying to get them to release this data. And now there is no WikiLeaks to do this kind of dirty work. So, the crows have come home to roost for Mr. Stone. But, Mitch, you had a little background on the oil rig Iranian group, and there's no doubt in my mind they're a proxy for either Russia, China, or their own. But, Mitch, if you want to fill in.
Exactly. Well, by the way, Roger Stone was compromised long before AP-242 got a hold of him. But that's another segment. Sorry for the politics there. They are a group who's sort of agnostic. They'll work. They're mercenaries, right? They'll work for anybody who wants to hire them for their services. And APT, the name that's been relabeled, is a security term for advanced persistent threats, which usually means like it's a low and slow attack, right? You don't notice it, right? It's happening over time. It's not like suddenly, poof, we got attacked and we got to respond to it, which you tend to not notice as quickly. And this way, it just reflects that they're tactics, because oil rig uses everything from, getting into websites and creating watering holes where people go to and then get infected, to spear phishing, as we mentioned earlier, and also they use the standard lateral attacks, so lateral movement when they get attacks. There's some interesting technologies we're going to talk about in the next segment around DNSSEC, but I think what's interesting is spear phishing. This is probably just the tip of the spear. I seriously doubt if Roger Stone is the only person who got compromised. Right? They would have gotten into his system. They go after credentials, and then they'll move into whatever areas. So we could see, both for Democrat and for Republican parties, this kind of ongoing deluge of information that just gradually sows chaos, because we find out, this person sent that out, or this is internal email over here. So I would expect to hear more about this.
Lisa, do you think that this is going to have some repercussions through the marketing efforts of all these campaigns? Because, historically, marketing in the political sense, at least, has been mudslinging, but now we don't even know how real the mud is.
Right. That's a great point. I think marketing has a really important role in maintaining a brand's cybersecurity posture, whether that brand is Amazon or the brand is one of the candidates. And the first thing there is really brand reputation management and crisis communication. A well-prepared marketing team can help a brand, a candidate, to really quickly communicate with constituents, with stakeholders, the media, to help mitigate brand damage. I think also another thing where marketing can be really helpful here is in the consistent communication and awareness. They have to be able to help people, the masses, become skeptics to really be able to discern what's real and what's not. It's hard to. I think my favorite thing that happened this week was the deep fake that Elon tweeted a couple days ago with him and Trump dancing to Staying Alive. I was like, wow, they've got some good moves. But ultimately, marketing collects a lot of data on people and needs to be very transparent with how data is used, what data is collected, how it's stored, how long it's retained, so that ultimately what a marketing organization can do for a brand is to enhance trust. And I think that's where we get into a lot of muddy waters, to your point, Mike, is that trust layer. It's so easily broken these days, and marketing needs to help brands, to help its constituents be able to detect, or just have that kind of deceit meter kind of go up with, is this accurate? Should we believe this? So I think marketing can play a pretty big role in the cybersecurity posture.
Hey, Lisa, can I ask you a quick question? It seems like the era of response into these kind of situations has significantly changed. It's, if you spill a cup of coffee on the floor, it's a coffee spill. You spill it in a rushing river, nobody notices, right? These things move so fast, and maybe you can over-respond to it and give it more life, or maybe it just doesn't matter. This too shall pass.
That's a great point about over-response. I hadn't considered that. I think ultimately the response needs to be consistent. It needs to be transparent. They need to also be working along with IT folks, the security folks, to understand what's the implication here, what's the impact that we've seen, to then, to your point, Mitch, be able to really balance what's the right level and consistency and a frequency of communications. I don't think we've seen over responses. I don't think we've seen that yet, but it is something that brands need to be aware of. What's the right balance to get our constituents believing and trusting in us and what we're putting out there?
Mitchell, I thought you said a Russian river.
Yes.
I was going to say, what's the deal with coffee and Russian rivers? Pour vodka, but anyway.
I'm drinking some Russian coffee this morning.
All right. But you know what's interesting is the response, or the lack of over-response, the restraint of the media this time versus in previous election cycles to give this oxygen.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Malin. That's just a matter of maybe guilt or just being completely used or played back in 2016.
Well, maybe smartening up.
Smartening up, right. Learning from your mistakes, although we still make mistakes in terms of covering a certain candidate. Mm-hmm. But, the interesting thing, too, is that the campaigns last time, and when 2016, it was John Podesta, who's a pretty high-profile campaign advisor. He was the guy who was victimized. So we have the same kind of parallel thing happen. Although, as Mitch said, there are probably multiple people, and it's metastasized, since it went through Stone, or Stone was played. But yeah, you're right. The whole media posture has gotten a little bit smarter about it, although it continues to normalize and make mistakes. But it's a little bit more savvy, and I wonder if it's even more savvy. And I know it's not exactly the same thing, but CrowdStrike, in a sense, heightens or maximizes the media's exposure and maybe a little bit of basic understanding about what these systems can do, good and bad, and how quickly they can create damage.
So I have a theory on this, right? I saw Chuck Todd, former Meet the Press host, at a lecture I attended, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago. And he said at the time that both the media and the public really had a hard time with social media, with digital kind of information, separating truth from fiction, how not to be played, to put it in your terms, John. And that it was going to take time, but eventually both the media and the public would learn how to kind of separate, the cream from the crop, and how to, be better and not be, quite as led around. He said it could take up to 20 years. And I think it might take up to 20 years. But maybe, because if they don't get the intended result they're looking for here, and it's still early in the election cycle, God knows what they're sitting on. But if they don't get the intended result here, is it as inviting a target? Is it as forbidden a fruit next cycle and the cycle after that? And maybe things go, the inflammation goes down, if you will, and things get a little better. We can hope.
Alan, to what degree is it to try to help one candidate versus the other, or are they just trying to disrupt democracy to the point where nobody believes in it?
In 2016, I think clearly Russia was trying to help Trump. They were not big Hillary fans, and Hillary and Putin had a history. I think in this cycle, it is much more about just influencing our elections, disrupting democracy, if you will. And let's be clear, guys, the U.S. election is not in a fishbowl or in a vacuum. We're not the only election where tampering is going on.
Right.
There's been a lot of tampering going on over in Europe, in Africa, Asia, South America, Well, in South America, they just decide who won, and regardless of who voted, they just announce who won.
Sure.
But election tampering worldwide, I would say, via digital means. Election tampering's been going on forever, right? It's the second oldest profession, but digital election tampering, hacking like this, I think is on the rise worldwide.
One of the phrases that kept cropping up at Black Hat was zero trust. Like maybe that's an ultimate goal, is just to so much chaos, mayhem, misinformation that you just don't trust institutions, period. I mean, that's an ultimate goal for some groups.
John, to be fair, don't we in the U.S. kind of give as good as we get? We're not exactly, squeaky clean all the time.
Oh, no. It goes back to our influence. I mean, I can get political. Maybe I'll just mention the CIA. Sorry. I know we haven't probably talked about this, but just this idea of the U.S. being lily white and innocent in all this is BS. I mean, we're as guilty as probably as we are as victimized. And
shocked.
Gambling shocked. Here? There's gambling going on? What are you talking about?
I'm clutching my pearls.
Are you bringing your hand back into this again?
Okay. But I think we'll wrap this up. But I think the important thing I wanted to leave our audience with is, guys, it's not even September, right?
Happening earlier, it seems.
Yeah, we still got 2 full months here. Whether this hack has more legs to it and information, or the next hacking will, or some AI deep fakes, wreak havoc somewhere else. I don't think this election cycle is going to be as smooth as it's been far from smooth, with one candidate almost, a hair away from being assassinated, another one dropping out. I mean, it's been a crazy cycle full of surprises. I don't think we've seen the last of them in terms of hacking and digital. So we'll take it from there. Anyway, speaking of AI and deepfakes, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong Gang. And when we come back, we'll be talking about deepfakes. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
All right, folks, as promised, we're back and we're talking about deepfakes and the need to track the provenance of content. This week, DigiCert acquired an outfit called Vercara, and they ostensibly, their primary business is just to help you defend against DDoS attacks, and they have a DNS server to do that. But in the course of the conversation with their CEO, it became apparent that these technologies are going to play a critical role in helping us thwart these deepfake kinds of attacks, because we're going to be able to track, hopefully, where content was originally created and how recently and who created it. So, Mitch, walk us through, if you would, some of the technologies maybe that we can use to combat all these issues before they overrun us.
Well, the DigiCert acquisition, Vercara has a couple of technologies. They have some of the traditional DDoS protection, caching, content filtering, things like that, firewall kinds of capabilities. But at the core of it is a different kind of DNS technology called DNSSEC. It's based on specification. It's been around for a while. I worked with a company, Secure64, back in the mid-2000s around this. And it's really, DNS is just software that runs on Linux or Unix computers, and that can be compromised, right? Just like anything else. And so, you're really concerned about if someone got into the DNS ecosystem and compromised that, then they can truly present themselves as I'm TechstrongGroup.com, right? When they're really not. And now all your addresses are resolving to some other internet address instead of where it should be. That's in the kind of the hierarchy of DNS servers. So DNSSEC is about protecting everything from not only what's what's running on the machine, but protecting memory, protecting the operating system, strengthening it, which I think is an interesting move for DigiCert. I mean, as a PKI digital certificate company, very, very prominent in the industry, acquired some businesses along the way. It's one of the core pieces, some people think, to authenticating content and its provenance, where it came from. So if I had a digital certificate attached to an email, which is what encryption is about, then I know whether it really came from Mitch's email server, or it came from some other place, or it really came from a domain that is TechstrongGroup.com versus something else, pretending it to be. So I think it positions them. It's not the silver bullet to solve this, but I'm a strong believer that PKI digital certificates are part of this solution that has to be underlying it, because that entire technology is built on an ecosystem of trust into certificate authorities who are issuing those certificates, saying Techstrong Group is Techstrong Group. That's who they are, and that domain really is theirs and run and operated by them.
So I've been covering DigiCert for years. I interviewed the CEO and most of the executive team multiple times. I usually go to their in-person user conference, which this year is virtual, but we'll be working with them on it and covering it as well. I did an interview with one of, and they, by the way, they have some of the smartest people when it comes to PKI and certificates and encryption and all of these things, quantum. I mean, they have an amazing bench. I met with one of their really, really bright people on this issue last year at their last conference. And, at the time, and of course this is pre-acquisition, obviously, the thought was, look, one way to bring some, sanity to the whole deep fake AI issue was that every graphic would have a certificate, just like, every container has its own digital certificate, every instance of a server, right? Certificates are not just for people identities anymore. The same way every instance of AWS has has an identity, the same way every container has an identity, the same way every IoT device has an identity. Well, every image would have an identity. And there could be some sort of watermark, if you will, certificate to make sure that it was legit and it hasn't been tampered with. Mitch, I don't know enough about the technology here to know if this falls into that along with the DNSSEC. There was an interesting article I mentioned to the gang in the Washington Post today about using AI to ferret out deepfakes, which are done with AI as well. Lisa, you mentioned something before about the deepfakes that Musk put up of him and Trump dancing or whatever. Well, if I'm not mistaken, that's a new service that Elon has rolled out at X, where if you're a paying X member, you can now create graphics. I'm not going to call them deep fakes, but you can create graphical images using public figures like that previously, it was verboten, right? You're not supposed to be doing deep fakes of these things. But now if you're a Twitter paying customer, Elon's going to let you do it, and he's the one screaming about security and so forth. So I don't know what the deal there is and whether that's going to lay out. But he also posted other deep fakes of political opponents of his. Which again, X right?
One,
I wasn't naming names, John.
See, that's the one thing. Sorry to interrupt. That's the one thing that kind of concerns me, especially the proliferation of deepfakes on a platform like X, which clearly has an agenda based on what's been going on.
But also clearly has rules against doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the rules at X, really? This is The other thing that concerns me too is that the deepfakes can be done either pro or con. I mean, they can be done to help a candidate. And I think somebody mentioned to me an example in India where a politician's long deceased father was in an ad.
I heard that
help the candidate. So I'm wondering, people. You assume people may know better, but I mean, in that case, it would be difficult. But I can see a scenario where we see these creations on a platform like X or any other type of whether Democrat or Republican site, kind of helping a candidate under the very, very flimsy circumstances, if not outright false circumstances, and swaying a number of people who are not well educated on the topic.
Let's go back to Lisa for a second. Are marketers concerned about this? Are they aware of it? To the whole point of content.
Or do they consider it an arrow in the quiver?
That's true. Good point.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about in the last segment, marketing has a definite role in helping a brand's cybersecurity posture. And I think that includes marketing helping thwarting deepfakes. There's a number of things that marketing can be involved in. Partnering with the tech folks on the technological advancements. Mitch, you did a great job talking about that with respect to DigiCert and Verkara policy changes, societal awareness, and marketing can help communicate all three. I think it's absolutely necessary. I was actually talking with talking about in Tech Target report that came out yesterday, a company called Pindrop some looking at some of their peers that are helping are now enabling what Amit Sinha, the CEO of DigiCert, talk about is that from a provenance perspective, there's going to be technologies that are going to allow end users to be able to submit content to platforms like Pindrop, for example, like Reality Defender, so that they can evaluate what parts of these audio, video, text are synthetic. And what marketing needs to do is help raise awareness. John, you kind of hit on this, educating the general population about the risks, the consequences of deepfakes, creating content that highlights some of the potential harm that could be caused by these deepfakes, like the misinformation that we're seeing. But also, I think marketing can help brands promote authenticity and transparency, developing campaigns to show the importance of people being vigilant to verify information, sources, develop counter messaging as well, so that it challenges the spread of the deepfake information, and then partnering with the technology folks and the security folks to understand how can the end users be enabled to do this on their own and get quick responses, so that the spread of misinformation is maybe reduced or mitigated to some degree.
Well, what always scares me, especially in this last few election cycles, and with the advent of AI, what have you, everything's faster, right? Speed is coming. The information is coming at us faster than we can possibly consume it. So if you flood the zone with 25 lies, vast majority of them are going to get through. And so that always scares me. I think the speed in which you're trying to bat this down. Just look at one of these press conferences or a debate. Fact checking in real time is almost become that way if you consume anything through social media or wherever you get your information. That's going to constantly be a problem. I mean, we will get better at defending against it, but it will always persist.
Mitch, how long will it take to get to this? Because, from my perspective, content provenance can't come here soon enough, but it seems like there's a lot of pieces and parts that aren't quite gel.
It is. It's a kind of akin to email security, right? There's been some things to help prevent spoofing, but that took specifications. It took people who create the email server software to agree on that, and then how you have to set up DNS to be able to authenticate whether someone's trying to spoof your domain. I know some efforts when I worked at Cable Lab, there were some efforts around trying to use PKI to help set up an ecosystem for content. And the problem is you have to do it with everyone who creates content and everyone who distributes content and everyone who consumes content. And that makes the problem extremely complex, really big. Maybe you could carve off an area and say, let's take the top digital newspapers, the ones Alan reads or whoever reads, and say, well, let's start with that and have some way of authenticating and knowing that this is actual authentic authentic content. Now, we do that today because we trust who the New York Times is or the Washington Post is. And that goes onto a site that they manage and control, and then we access it over a secure browser. That's all well and good until that site gets compromised, and then we don't know if that content's real anymore. And that's our challenge around this: is every piece of content on there would have to be tied into a PKI kind of trust or something else that would help us. So it's radically changing how we share and authenticate content, Mike. That's why this isn't an easy problem to solve.
Bringing this full circle back to the DigiCert acquisition and my conversation with them, Mitch, that is the key, right? We saw an exponential uptick in certificate use when we went from using certificates just for human identity to using certificates for machine identity, right? Mm-hmm. In Carl Sagan terms, billions and billions. Now, if you want to start using certificates or PKI or watermark, whatever you want to call it, for every graphic, for every piece of content, doesn't have to just be graphics, I guess, but for every piece of content, I mean that, I just can't, I don't think the human mind can get their mind wrapped around
where this has happened, Alan. I mean, we talk about blockchain, if you've heard about that, or on crypto.
Maybe that's an answer. You're right.
That's all built on PKI. That's what lets you trust. I don't know whether this entry in the log is authentic, but I use PKI to validate. I don't know who you are, but it knows who you are, and other people trust who you are, that is an actual valid entry. And that's what underpins the entire crypto market. So it's not impossible, but in that case, they created a separate ecosystem to do it, right? It kind of had to be built from the ground up this way. And that's why I was saying maybe that's the way to do this with content. You just have to kind of rebuild the content ecosystem from the ground up again. Not an easy thing to do.
Hey, John, can you reach under your desk and pull up one of those newspapers I know that you're squirreling away there?
There's one. That was a Mercury Chronicle.
Is that not the most
New York
absolute
Times
form of authenticated content right there? So maybe we need to go back to print and things you put in your hands. It's a crazy idea.
If only we could have. That's why I got out of the business. Oh my God, it's dying away. But that's another story.
No such thing as counterfeits, but okay, yeah.
Well, in some cases, yeah. I won't go down that path.
Sarcasm.
Yeah, me too.
Snarky sarcasm. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, how many? We're all, I look at my children; they wouldn't know how to fold a New York Times to read it. Right? There was an art to folding the Times or
origami.
To it. Did you explain ways? Sorry. Can I tell you something really quickly? I was in Las Vegas. It was about a year ago. I think Mike may have been at this conference. It was like the Service Now or something. And I was desperate to find a newspaper. So I would go into a liquor store and there's like this 70-year-old guy there. And I said to him, "Do you carry newspapers anymore?" And the guy just started laughing at me and said, "What's a newspaper?" And I said to him, you should know. And he goes, I know. Those don't exist anymore. Good luck, my friend. And he sent me on my way.
Yeah, we're not going
to... There were rules to how you read the paper on the subway, right? Not only did you fold it, but you had to make sure that the person sitting across from you was done with their section as you were kind of looking at your section.
Before you turned it.
Well, and it was
or you could use it as a backdrop. The Long Island Railroad. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it was delivered by the neighborhood kid. I was one of those kids.
I was a newsday kid.
If they messed with anything, you go talk to their parents. Take them down.
Yeah.
Sorry,
London too. They read the paper in a certain way, so those would read the tabloids with the page 3 girls would hold it at an angle so you couldn't see what they're looking at.
I don't think we're returning to paper, guys. I don't care, Mike, John, how much you pine for it.
I'm a dinosaur. I like books. Like I have I like Moses books biography behind me. It's just like 1,300 pages. It's like a phone book, but it hurts me to read because I literally have to keep it up. But I'll hold out forever.
We still have email. Maybe it's coming back.
But here's the point. Here's the point, though, guys. If this becomes a big enough problem, necessity is the mother of invention. We got to do something. And that's, to me, the issue. Anyway, we're over time on this one. let's take a break. We've got our third block coming up on this splendid Friday and full Techstrong TV ahead of us. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, we're starting off now in our third block, and the state of Texas has decided to sue General Motors for the way it's collecting data from drivers. I guess General Motors is interested in what they can find out about your habits for driving and maybe your insurance records and whatever else that they want to bill us. But Lisa, I know in a previous episode, we talked about Oracle having issues where they settled what feels to me as a similar case out of court. Is this just going to become a bigger issue? And what's going on with all this data that companies are collecting?
I think it is going to become a bigger issue. And we're seeing the state of Texas. We're not seeing it at the federal level, where we're seeing it at the state level come in and say, hey, this is not okay. You cannot keep using all of this data, collecting in, one, without the driver, the owner of the vehicle, being aware of it, and two, use it for purposes that you're not being transparent with. I think the transparency is key. We talk about marketing all the time in my webcast every other week, and we talk about the value of data, and there's so much data. Marketing has become a science, in part because of the data and the AI that runs on that data. But there's the flip side too, where marketing organization, brands partnering with marketing, with IT, with security, with sales, need to start looking at what are we collecting, in this case, on the owners of GM vehicles in the state of Texas. How are we using this data? Where are we storing it? How long are we retaining it? And are we being transparent with those millions of people affected? And in this case, no. And I think it's something that we're going to see more and more as organizations have to comply with things like GDPR, CPRA in California. I think we're going to see more of those data privacy and regulation acts at the state level. But I think another thing that I was thinking about in response to this particular lawsuit is I was with a family friend recently on Cape Cod who's in her 80s and has a brand new car and isn't thinking about all the data it's collecting on her, was concerned with how much tech is in the car that is hard to understand. So we have people out there in different generations that are out there driving that aren't even thinking of what is this collecting on me as I'm operating this vehicle, and where is it going? So I think what marketing needs to be able to do, and I've talked about this before, kind of like a broken record, is it's the transparency. Communicate to the drivers, the owners, the types of data that are being collected, why, what's the purpose, what's the scope, and be transparent with how it's stored and used, how long is it retained. Also, manufacturers need to obtain consent. Explicit consent. I'm sure that there are probably things, and when you go and buy a vehicle, it's a 3-hour process. There's a ton of paperwork still. There might be things in there where you're signing or just initialing, and it's allowing them to collect and use your data, but you're not aware of it because it's not explicit. I think it needs to be that. And I think that organizations need to work with marketing on data minimization. What is the minimum amount of data we need to collect and why? And ensuring that marketing partnering with IT and security are doing what they can to ensure that the driver data is secure. There's no unauthorized access, use. It's got to be encrypted, et cetera. It's a partnership, but it's definitely something that I think needs to be explicit. And I think this is the tip of the spear.
Yeah, you're right. Lisa's spot on. What's interesting is the Texas Attorney General is Ken Paxton. He's the same guy who is part of the group that sued Google along with the Department of Justice. So if he does it, I assume Letitia James in New York will be looking at certain companies. California will be in the same way. In a sense, it's like data is considered the new oil, right? We keep hearing that phrase, but it's also perhaps Achilles heel for a lot of companies, not just tech companies. They're going to delve harder and harder into AI as they adopt it. And as they do, they're going to be gathering more information more quickly and get given what states are going to probably do, and California, as Lisa mentioned, has one of the more aggressive privacy laws, we're going to see more of that. It's already happening in Europe. It's just going to escalate.
Yeah.
So John, yes, Texas was one of 1632 or all 50 states of that Google thing. I would call Ken Paxton out for being a maverick there.
I was going to give him a
and that's the thing. Shades of Elizabeth Warren. Is it really Texas, the bastion of of doing this, or is it that Tesla, or is it that just Tesla moved there? And because I find it hard to believe that GM's the only company doing this.
No,
but and this is why I don't think we need, again, with the Supreme Court, with the administrative use of administrative or the extent, the power of administrative agencies at the federal level, we're in a bad place. But this is something that shouldn't be state by state. This should be a nationwide thing, because what happens when I cross from Texas to Oklahoma? Is GM allowed to start collecting it again? Right. This is not a state by state. This screams for a consumer protection agency at a federal level.
Totally.
Did I?
Right.
But conceptually, you agree with what the state of Texas is doing here?
No,
Alan?
I don't.
No,
I don't conceptually agree, because I'm going to tell you what, Lisa, I think you hit it dead on. Let the marketing people talk. For the most part, what GM and these companies are doing, I think actually serves a public good. Right. I think it's that information that underpins the OnStar emergency response team, right? When you've been in an accident and you're bleeding from your head and you can't talk so good, but you're able to hit that OnStar button, you want them to be able to gather some data to help you.
Good point. Yes.
You want them to collect data that can make our cars safer going forward. This is a public relations issue, not a regulatory issue. I think if GM, Ford, and even Tesla, and let's face it, Tesla's software wrapped around a battery, okay? I'm sure they're collecting tons of stuff. And so, but if the car companies can do a good job of saying why they're collecting this stuff, and it is somewhat anonymized, I'm going to think, but how often until a brake failure happens? How often do we get blowouts? How often do the lights go on or off? What speed do we usually travel? All of this data that could be going into making us safer, making more, safer vehicles, suggesting better legislation for car safety. Do we need the airbags on the sides and what have you? I think the car industry, the car manufacturers can, and by extent others, can make a huge PR campaign here that they need this data to protect us. Are they selling it? I didn't see an allegation of them selling this data.
Yeah,
so that's my take, Mike.
That's where the rub is, right? If they're exploiting the data, and
if they're selling it, that's another story.
That's another story, right? If they're using the data to protect you in the case of emergency, like with your iPhone, I mean, you have those certain options in case of emergency, and you're incapacitated. Right. I'm all for that. But yes, that's where you tip the line in selling it.
I think the subtle issue at work here is that they're buying data from third parties as well, and there's this whole underbelly of data brokers out there, and no one quite knows what that data came from, if they got permissions to use it in the first place. But Lisa, do we need more regulations around all this data brokering stuff that is feels to me very much like the Wild Wild West out there?
It does feel like the Wild Wild West, but Alan brought up some really good points there about thinking about the type of data that's being collected. How is it being used? Because you're right, Alan. We want our cars to be safer. We want to be safer. We want to be more protected as we're traveling about wherever we're going. We also want to make sure that there is, and I'm not sure if regulations is the right word, Mike, but there has to be guardrails around misuse of information or more information being sold, not just how I'm operating my vehicle, but information being, sold by data brokers to determine if I need my insurance hiked up. Because let's face it, they're not going to go the opposite way and say, Lisa Martin is such a safe driver of her car. Let's dial down her insurance premiums. But I think, I don't think it's regulation. I think it's more guardrails.
Lisa, let me
Go ahead.
stop you there and ask your opinion. Have you guys ever done the Progressive or Geico thing where they send you that plug-in that plugs into your car and it monitors your driving, and if you're a good boy or girl, you can get lowered rates? I tried
not
it.
done
They
that.
said, we're lucky we don't raise your rates. Unplug it and send it back. But, you know.
I mean, technically, who's driving, at least in the state of Florida, we yell at people who are driving at the speed limit, right? They're going to cause accidents and they're getting in the way.
Yeah. No,
Same in California.
But Lisa,
Like
to your
California
point.
too, yeah.
No, but Lisa made a point. To your point, Lisa, if the insurance company came to you and said, hey, I'm going to monitor your driving, and I'm going to see how fast you go and how quick you brake, how hard you brake, how much you change lanes. Do you put your signal on before you change lanes? And if you're a good person, we'll lower your rates. If you're not, we may higher your rates. You want to roll the dice.
Yeah.
Right? Are we okay with that?
I don't know, but I will tell you about my early adventures of living in the state of Florida. So I was doing 80 and I saw a cop coming. So I went right down to 65, and then he sat on my bumper for about, I don't know, maybe 5 miles or so. And before he pulled me over, and then he pulled me over to give me a warning for quote unquote going too slow, even though I was at the speed limit.
What?
You know, in Florida, the rule is you go 10 miles over speed limit. They won't pull you over if you're just 10 miles over. And on the highways, the speed limit's 70.
That's kind
so
of
80 is the going rate.
Yeah, California, at least I think, right? If you go on 101 or 280, if you're going 70, you're fine.
I agree.
When do you ever go 70 on 101 or 280? You guys have so much traffic.
When you can't go faster because there's cars in front of you.
Right, exactly.
When you through the traffic, that's how you get the speed, Alan. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's like a video game.
But no, I mean, look, they're gathering this data. But, you know, all kidding aside, the real issue here is, and then Lisa, you dead on, I think, right off the bat on this one. We need to make it more explicit when companies, whether they be car companies or Amazon with Alexa or you know, any of these companies, we need to be more explicit when we're signing over permission for them to get in our shorts, right? To just really collect a lot of data that we're not realizing that they're collecting, what they're using it for, who they're sharing it with, etc. Right? Is it going into the next version of ChatGPT, LLM or something, right? And I think it would be good to have better transparency on disclosures around that. That's really the issue to me.
It should also be fairly simple to read. It shouldn't be like 1,000-word document.
Yeah.
No, it can't be legalese.
Exactly.
You just click the box at the bottom.
Right, and then that. Look, who said about going to pick up a new car? It's a minimum of 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Right. And
yes.
by the time you're 45 minutes in, you're just, you know, you're looking for those yellow highlights that you got to. Actually, the last couple times it's been an iPad they gave me, and I just hit initial.
Right.
It's
a DocuSign.
Yes.
I don't even know what I'm initialing. And I don't understand the babble the guy's talking about.
I think this is a conspiracy to suck the joy out of driving, so we'll all get Teslas and then nobody will be driving.
Wow. Musk is behind
I hope not. I really do.
I'm sure he is.
Right.
He's done it again.
Well, but seriously, the amount of information that we knowingly or unknowingly give people permission to collect from us. It's the same thing on your EULAs with your software licenses. I had an issue on my Oura Ring today. I've had it for about a week. Well, I've had my Oura Ring for a long time, but for the last week, my nighttime heart rate's not being monitored, and I went on help and opened a ticket. Well, it turns out they have access to all of it, and that's health information, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine, and you know, they've been collecting it, and I guess I knew they were collecting it. How else do I see it in my reports in the app every day? But you think about it, they have a complete record of how often I exercise, what my heart rate is, what my REM sleep is, deep sleep, you know, all the things that Oura collects, your cardiac age and all of that. I never really, you know, who reads those EULAs?
And what are they doing with that data? I don't know.
Right.
Where does it end up too, right?
Right. I mean, could they monetize that? Because times are tough. Yeah. Don't pay the $5.99 a month subscription for the app. We'll just sell you data.
Okay. I would love an app that just kind of told me who has my data and for what, and maybe for what purpose, just a little synopsis of the EULA agreement. So, and then maybe, like on your credit card where you can turn off services, I can turn off data access to various people.
That's a brilliant idea.
Mike, you should start a business.
There you go.
You should.
I'm on my way to the valley. I'm on the way to the valley. Get me some appointments with some tech pros. We'll get this going.
Get them up on Sand Hill Road.
You got it.
All right.
Gosh, that trip.
Shot. I need him here. Go easy, okay? Anyway, or maybe, look, John wants to be the new chief content officer.
No.
Mike, go ahead.
No. Yes, part of a play. No.
Listen, I think on that note, we're going to let you guys get on with your weekend. We do have a full Techstrong TV lineup immediately following Techstrong Gang today. So do check that. It's a great way to end your week. There's so much going on, and we have such great content there. Lise, quick plug for your podcast. Remind people about it and how they can get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Marketing, Art, and Science. It's available on the Futurum Group's and 65 Media's YouTube pages. Episode just dropped yesterday featuring the Chief Marketing Officer at Dynatrace, and we talk about leveraging AI marketing councils and how they can help organizations to really generate and improve marketing source business. So really good stuff there. It's a bi-weekly show, and you can find it on Futurum Group and 65 Media YouTube, and of course on Techstrong.
And a bird tells me it's soon going to be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast channels. So stay tuned for that. All right. On that note, John, Lisa, thanks for joining us. Mitch had to jump out early, but thanks to him as well. Mike, I will be back at the desk with you on Monday.
We'll see you then, but we'll be on the show. Are you going to do the show tomorrow?
No, I don't. I'm in Texas. I don't land. Well, through the magic of television, I will not be there tomorrow today, but I'll be there tomorrow, Monday.
Gotcha.
So for Tuesday's show. All righty.
See you Tuesday.
Until then, though, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Have a great weekend, everyone.
I'm Bonnie Schneider, sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group. I'm excited to introduce you to a groundbreaking new initiative from Techstrong Research, the Sustainability Pulse Meter. The Pulse Meter offers valuable insights into how environmental responsibility factors into tech purchasing decisions for key players in the industry. Position your company as a leader in the industry and differentiate from your competitors with the Sustainability Pulse Meter, offered exclusively from Techstrong Research.